and welcome to another episode of Mine Planning Matters, a podcast where we talk about where the industry gets it both right and wrong when it comes to mine planning and mining engineering. This podcast is not just for mine planners, it's for everyone who has anything to do with mine plans, from those who create them, to those who execute them, and all the way up to those who endorse or sign off on them. My name is Mark Bowater, Director and Founder of Australian Mining Consultancy Insignia Mining, and I speak from experience, having been involved in mine planning for over 30 years. Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Mine Planning Matters. Firstly, apologies, it's been a while since I created the last episode. I've been away on a family holiday for a month or so, but I'm back and it's time to get some more episodes out there and to get some more discussion around mine planning happening. Now I'm going to take a break from stochastic scheduling. I've still got plenty more I want to talk about in that space, but this episode I'm going to tackle something different. From one of my LinkedIn posts, one of my colleagues, Danny McCarthy, asked the question and challenged me as to whether the art of mine planning has died or not. And that's a very good question. And so I figured it was worthy of a Mine Planning Matters episode. And of course, the first thing is that in terms of my thoughts on the issue, I can really only talk about it relative to Australia. I can't really talk about changes in the art of mine planning elsewhere in the world, but I can speak to Australia. And unfortunately, I think he might be right. But I think we also are at a crossroads, and I'm going to be interested to hear what other people have to think on this subject. So I'm certainly putting out there for some comments back on whether the art of mine planning has died. Now, for me, the way I think about it is I think back to when I first started in the mining industry in 1989, so a whole 35 years ago. And I think about how we used to mine plan then versus how mine planning happens now in Australia. And the first thing that I think is that when I started, we didn't have fancy reserving software, geological modelling software that we used. We basically had geological cross-sections generated by the geologists that we used to use a light table to measure areas of the ore and waste through the various cross-sections through the ore body. And we used spreadsheets and turned those cross-sections into quantities, which we put in a spreadsheet. And then we actually set up Excel spreadsheets. And this was for anywhere from a monthly plan through to life of mine. The process was the same. What that meant was it was a very manual process. You didn't produce a set of reserves in a hurry, and you didn't produce a schedule in a hurry. They both took a fair while. And what it also meant was that because you put so much work into them, you knew the reserves very well and you knew the schedule very well. You had a pretty in-depth knowledge of it because there was so much work in it and because it took so long. And there were no such thing as optimizers or anything like that because we were basically just scheduling in a spreadsheet. And so there was no black box about the scheduling process. There was no computer AI, any of those sorts of things. It was basically just the human brain. And as I said, you tended to know the schedule very well. And of course, that was pretty important when it came to communicating with the people who were charged with executing the plan, the supervisors and the superintendents. That depth of knowledge that you had of the plan certainly came in handy at times. And if I compare that all with generically the process within Australian mining today, we have these very high-powered tools that can generate reserves fairly quickly, auto-generate ramp designs and all those sorts of things. And so we can generate and change reserves fairly quickly. And then we also have very high-powered scheduling software that allows us to generate schedules very quickly, run numerous iterations, and even a lot of auto-scheduling where we will just put in a set of dependencies or constraints or priorities and let the scheduler choose the path. And so we have a lot of sort of optimization within our scheduling these days, and a bit of, we are certainly sort of heading towards a bit of the AI, and because we have these high-powered tools and can run schedules so quickly, and we have so much ability from a data point of view, I think we have the issue where our stakeholders have got far more involved in mine planning these days, and their demands of what they want to see in mine plans. They want to see truck hours, tons of explosives used, and all these other demands that are useful from a cost forecasting point of view or anything else. And so I think we have a fairly different situation now where our mine planners are very dependent on their tools because the stakeholders demand so much of them. We also have a fairly different industry in Australia from the point of view of the time that a mine planner has available to work on mine plans. These days we have so many other initiatives and things that come into play that take mine planners time. They get involved in so many things from a safety perspective, continuous improvement initiatives and systems, and other sorts of meetings that take the mine planners time away from being able to mine plan. That when I first started, we didn't have a lot of those. You basically were pretty much spent most of your time sort of mine planning. And so our mine planners don't have as much time now to put into mine plans, and they're often on a short time availability because the plan's got to come out at a certain day of the week. And so there's a lot more sort of black box, quick run of a lot of schedules, or even just one schedule, get something out there and get something out to the stakeholders that has a pile of information in it. So I think our mine planners these days have a better handle on mine plans from the point of view of being able to run options and change things and try different things. And so they have a better handle at a higher level on different optionality, but maybe not as in-depth an understanding of the mine plan and where the risks are, and those other sorts of things, because they don't have the time to know the plan as intimately, as in-depth as, for example, when I started 35 years ago. But the other sort of, I think, fairly major structural change that we've had, certainly in the Australian mining industry, is the number of mining engineers that are available, and the sort of fairly constant shortage of mining engineers over the last 20 years or so, other than a couple of blips. Most of the last 20 years, we have had a shortage of mining engineers. One of the things that tends to lead to is it tends to lead to engineers being promoted earlier. When I started, typically it was more than 5 years before you became a senior engineer. It was 5 to 7 years or something like that. That meant that you'd spent a year or two in a few of the different roles of design and drill and blast, and in my case, I actually didn't become a mine planning engineer, a scheduler, until I was a senior engineer. And so I actually tended to know draglines fairly well, and I knew drill and blast fairly well, and I knew sort of truck and shovel design and pit design because I'd worked in all of those roles. But with a shortage of engineers in the industry, we're tending to promote earlier, and sometimes our scheduling engineers have only spent time in one or maybe two roles, and then they're a senior engineer guiding other engineers and potentially doing the mine planning without having worked in all of the areas. And for me, I think it would definitely make better mine planners if you have a knowledge of what it is that you are planning. I think in summary, there are a number of reasons that we are on the cusp of losing the art of mine planning. And that's nothing to do with the people or the ability of people. There are structural changes that have happened in the industry in terms of technology and availability of resources. And it's certainly not our mine planners today, the fault of our mine planners today. I know plenty of them who would love to have more time to generate their plans and would love to have less distractions and probably would like to have more control over their plans than what they currently do. Certainly within the Australian mining industry, we have a lot of mine planners being told what input assumptions to use in their plans rather than the work that they've done on historically what they are. I think we have a lot of mine planners today who are forced into producing plans that they actually don't really believe in. And so that is all, I think, contributing to to losing the art of mine planning. And I think it's interesting in that for a while I've always thought to myself that there's a lot of jobs that are going to be made redundant by AI, but I can't see mining engineers being made redundant by AI for a long time. But then I wonder whether that is the case. Certainly our software providers are creating smarter tools and more automated tools. And there's a bit of an element of they need to, because we don't have the mining engineering resources to invest the labour time that we did in the past. And so we need smarter tools. And so how far away before we have smarter tools that require very minimal labour time and we do make mine engineering more redundant? I think that's a really good question, and I'm interested to hear any thoughts or feedback from people on that very subject. Thanks for listening to Mine Planning Matters and my thoughts on mine planning. This podcast is for the benefit of the mining industry, and that's you. So I'd love to hear from you through the comments section, and please feel free to let me know any topics you'd like discussed in future episodes. You'll find much more content at our Insignia Mining website, and if you find any of our content valuable, please let your mining colleagues know so they can benefit as well.